following is a presentation of Cable 8, Howard Community College.
Hello, and welcome to On Location. I'm Dawn Barnes. On Location is a monthly series that examines various topics of interest to Howard Countyans. This month, Cable 8 would like to help celebrate Halloween. For some people, Halloween comes only once a year, but for others, contact with ghosts and spirits from the past is an everyday occurrence. We'll meet some people who have seen these ghosts and experience unexplainable incidents firsthand. Do you believe in ghosts? Join me for the next half hour as we visit some of the ghosts of Howard County. Then you decide. According to Maryland folklore, when a man dies, his spirit comes back to haunt his former home. Because many large old houses remain in a community generation after generation, they often carry with them legends of former residents whose spirits were left behind. Ghosts have been credited with windows flying open, audible footsteps, slamming doors shut, rearranging furniture, and even creating a cooking aroma. Unexplainable events have been taking place in the county for years, generation after generation, regardless of the owner. What causes these supernatural occurrences is still a mystery, but one thing is for sure, they are out there. An area that seems to have more than its share of hauntings is historic Ellicott City. One building in particular is rumored to be inhabited by an entire family of ghosts. The Hayden House, also known as Oak Lawn, is located in between the new and the old courthouse in Ellicott City. The house was built in 1840 by Edwin Parsons Hayden as a home for him and his family. He died in 1850 at the age of 38, leaving a widow and 6 children. It is his ghosts and those of his wife and children that are said to haunt the premises. The house was purchased by the county in 1937 and used as the headquarters for the Howard County Board of Education for some time. From the 1960s to 1981, the Hayden House was home to the District Court and the Department of Parole and Probation. It was during this time that many unusual happenings began to take place. Employees reported mysterious smells of cooking when no food or cooking apparatus was in evidence. The smell of eggs, bacon, toast, biscuits, and coffee was common in the morning. Other times of the day would generate smells of vegetable soup and apple cobbler. Several employees witnessed these smells, along with shadowy figures and vaporous shapes that would suddenly appear and quickly vanish. Doors would open by themselves and doorknobs would turn without the aid of human hands. Although the district employees were not afraid of the ghosts and perceived them as friendly, at the same time, no one was eager to remain in the building alone after dark. Peggy Pumphrey is the widow of the former district court commissioner, Thomas Pumphrey.
And I think the thing that Tom was most aware of was his own experience when he went upstairs, climbed the stairs, then you turn, I think, to your left, and as he started going down beside the banister, he came into this very cold, shockingly cold air. And he walked perhaps 10 to 20 feet, and he felt that there was something following him. And he turned around, and there was this very misty, sort of like a little fog following. And as he looked at it, it apparently disappeared because he only saw it from that quick glance as he turned around. But that was his most personal experience at the court, at the district court. There was the very strange thing of the man who came and asked him if he could look around. I think he came in the front door, but no, there was no sound because he surprised Tom when he came in the office, and he said, "Do you suppose that I could look around the house, the courthouse, the district court part?" And he said, "Because I used to live here." And I think Tom said, yes, because there was nothing you could get into that would harm any part of the court's work or anything, because that's all locked up at night. And but he just simply seemed to disappear. He just, of course, Tom was working at the time, so he said, I could have simply looked down and written a sentence or so and looked up, but there wasn't a sound. And as an old house has creaky floors, there was always, you couldn't go up the stairs without hearing somebody go up the stairs. You couldn't walk on the floor sometimes without a creak here and there. So, but there was absolutely no sound. And so he thought he should get up and check around because it was so quiet. And he went to check the doors, and the other doors were locked. And the only door that was open was the front door, and he didn't seem to have gone back out the front door. So that was a slightly eerie because, you don't want anybody wandering around. But there was no sign of him in it at all, so we always kind of wondered.
Today, Oak Lawn is the home of the county's law library, and employees who currently work there have not seen or heard from the Hayden family ghosts since renovations to the building took place. Up the hill from the courthouse, not far from Oak Lawn, stands the remains of the Patapsco Female Institute, a finishing school for young ladies in the mid-1800s. It is believed that a former student still inhabits the property where she once attended against her will. Annie Vanderloot didn't like the Patapsco Female Institute where her father had sent her and detested the place in letters home. She contracted pneumonia while attending the institute, and there she died. It is believed that Annie's ghost walks among the ruins of the granite structure. She has been seen dressed in a long gown, walking out the front door, down the long steps, and across the front lawn, only to vanish. Others have said they sensed a presence when visiting the ruins. It is believed that Annie has remained behind as protector of the Patapsco Female Institute's memory. Today, the Patapsco Female Institute is undergoing preservation work, and many of the construction workers have sensed Annie's presence. Tools would be missing from one moment to the next. Stone would be switched around and had fallen on occasions where no wind or movement could have caused the fall. One worker told us a rock was thrown at him and stopped in midair right before hitting his face. Then it fell to the ground. Although no one was willing to go on camera and admit to these ghostly experiences, several said they would not work at the site after dark. In Laurel, Maryland, stands a 175-year-old Victorian-style farmhouse that is haunted. Although there is not much known about the history of the home, it is clear that someone other than the owners inhabits the house. Linda and John Armstrong bought the old farmhouse in 1979 and immediately began restoration work. It wasn't long after they moved in that they began to hear strange noises in the house.
I have a son who's now 22, but at the time he was about 8 years old, and so we have a front staircase and a back staircase. So he would be upstairs in his bed and he could sneak down the back staircase to get something to eat. So I would always hear noises and I'd yell at him, stop that or whatever, and I would never hear from him, but I would just assume it was him. I also have cats, so I just assumed all these noises had to be the animals. And old houses do creak and make funny noises. But there are a couple of instances where I became concerned. One in particular, my cats were outside. At that time, Whiskey Bottom Road was not as busy as it is right now. And I kept hearing a noise in the front of the house, or the back of the house, rather. And thinking it was my son, I would yell, "Tom, go to sleep." And I was in the front room reading, quiet, with no music, nothing, just I like to read, and I like to read in silence. And I was by myself. So after a while, the noise would start again. And so I'm yelling at the top of my lungs, "Tom, go to sleep." The third time, I get up and go storming into the kitchen, no Tom. I go storming upstairs, he's fast asleep. So I shrug it off, all right. I go back downstairs, and I had the door somewhat closed into the living room because it was cold out, and I think I had the fireplace going, and that kept the room warmer. Well, one of the cats just kind of strolled in. The door creaked, the cat walked in, and I really had a hard time with that. So I called the police, and they were wonderful. They kept me on the line. I said, somebody must be in my house. I don't know what's going on. They were so terrific. They were at my house, and gosh, I don't know how long, but she kept me on the phone the entire time. She didn't want me to get off the phone. And I don't know how many policemen arrived, and they went all through my house, upstairs, downstairs, in the basement, which is very, very spooky, everywhere. I made them check absolutely everything, and nothing. I couldn't find anything. I felt like an idiot, so I never called them again. But I have heard noises since then, and I just chalk it up to whatever.
Although the Armstrongs heard these strange noises for quite some time, they didn't really believe the house was haunted until one night when both she and her husband were awakened by an unexpected visitor.
About 5 years after living in the house, my husband and I, it was in the middle of the night, he woke up yelling, which woke me up. I sat up in bed, and I thought I saw somebody at the foot of our bed. He turned the light on, it went away, I went back to sleep. But neither one of us talked about it the next day. And then we had a house guest a couple of days later. And just making conversation, my husband said, "I had the strangest dream the other night." And I kind of perked up, and I said, "Yeah, what was it about?" He said, "I could have sworn that there was a woman standing at the foot of our bed." And I said, "Yes, and what did she look like?" And he explained what she looked like, and I said, "Well, I had the exact same dream." I said, "But she went away as soon as you turned the light on." I remember everything distinctly, but I wasn't afraid. So our friend, who was ready to bolt out the door and not spend the night with us, he just didn't know what to think. And we didn't know what to think. And we kind of laughed it off, but it made us feel a little uncomfortable.
One day, a friend of Linda's father was visiting the Armstrongs, who was familiar with automatic handwriting. She was able to make contact with the ghosts in the house and produced several pages of legible handwriting. It seemed the ghost was pleased with all the work the Armstrongs had put into restoring the house.
She's very sensitive and has always felt that the house was haunted and said there's more than one. She says there's 3 women. And that she always smells a lot of perfume when she's upstairs. And the hallway is there's something in the hallway. The hallway and one of the front bedrooms. And I've had other people tell me the same thing. There's something in that hallway that's whatever. I don't know, I don't feel it, but I guess I'm not that sensitive.
Linda says she has never felt threatened by the ghosts or ghosts that are in her house. Since they seem to be friendly and unintimidating, there doesn't seem to be any reason for concern. Just over the Ellicott City line is the small town of Oella. On the top of the hill overlooking Oella is a row of homes, one of which is believed to be haunted. Jeffrey Baker and his wife, Anne, lived in the haunted row home for over 4 years.
We moved to the house in July of 1990, and we lived there a total of 4 years. These strange smells started immediately. My wife and I don't believe in ghosts, but there was something weird about that house. These smells, which I can best characterize as a smell of cooking ham, would permeate the entire house, and we couldn't pinpoint the spot where it was coming from. Now, these houses are 200 years old, and people used to cook down in the basement. That's where the kitchen originally was. Well, there was certainly a smell coming from there, but it was also throughout the entire house. And the smell would come in all different weather conditions, whether it was cold, hot, dry, or wet. It would come in all different times of the day. Well, people could say an odd smell is just an odd smell, and I agree with them on that. But taken with one or two other things that happened with the house, it's just a little more than odd, frankly.
Jeffrey and his wife were not totally convinced the house was haunted until they received some shocking information from friends who had visited them at their home.
In the fall of 1992, just before Thanksgiving, we had a couple over for dinner. And we had a very enjoyable, what I thought was a very enjoyable evening with them. And several days later, however, when my friend called to thank me for dinner, he had a lot of hesitation in his voice and a lot of just start and stops and odd feelings about the whole thing. And finally he blurted out, he said, "Jeff, is your house haunted?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, when you and I were on the top floor of the house, and when my wife and his wife were on the first floor of the house, both my friend and his wife heard a distinct, very loud human moaning." Now, these people are rational people. They're not some wackos. My wife and I did not hear the moaning, but both of them independently heard this moaning. They were terrified. They didn't mention it that evening at our house, but as soon as they stepped out the door, they both looked at each other and said, "That house is haunted. Did you hear that noise?" I mean, both of them at the same time. And they were frankly afraid to come back to our house because of this. And I asked them, was it a floorboard creaking? Was it the heater kicking on? Was it a car going by? No, no, no. It was distinct human moaning.
Later, the Bakers learned of an incident in one of their neighbors' homes.
They also had a daughter who was babysitted for the house that adjoined us. And at one point, she had a new radio that she had brought over to listen to while she was babysitting. And apparently, the radio went haywire in that the volume would go up and come down and up and come down erratically, like somebody was turning it up and down, and it was a brand new radio, and it didn't happen again when they took it out of the house, just that one time when it was in the house and she was babysitting.
The home has recently been renovated and is ready to welcome new tenants. Wouldn't it be nice to come home to the smell of a home-cooked meal? In Savage, Maryland is the historic Savage Mill, a unique collection of specialty shops, quality antiques, handmade crafts, home furnishings and accessories, and original works of art. Established in 1822, Savage Mill served as a working textile mill until 1947. In the early days of the mill, a woman who worked as a spinner was walking down the steps of the tower and fell to her death. It is believed that her wistful presence remains in the tower and carding building, the oldest surviving structure of the mill. Arlene Claiborne, artist and owner of Shagreen, has sensed the ghost's presence while working late at night.
I've worked here very, very late at night, many evenings with the display man, and he's always told me little bits and pieces of stories that have happened to him relating to the ghosts. But at that point, I had never felt anything until under two circumstances. One night, I was painting late in the hallway, a big unit that wouldn't fit into my space. And it was about after midnight. And of course you were feeling quite uncomfortable anyway, a little bit. But then I just felt sort of like a presence with me, and it got very cold behind me, and I kept looking around, and nothing had appeared. And then I was just kept hearing things walking down, and then behind me this cold breeze came zipping right back around me. So I finished painting, and then I called down to security, Bill was here that night, and he looked all around and didn't find anything, so we attributed it to our infamous ghost here. And then this last spring we were painting on a set downstairs, and I went into the bathroom to wash up all the paints and everything afterwards, and there was nobody in the mill but Earl Yates and I. The place was dead dark. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and the doors started slamming all around downstairs, and that was the same staircase that leads up to the tower, and he was in another area, and I started yelling, and we were thinking at first there was an intruder. We looked everywhere. There was nobody around, and we could see almost like shadows passing around. And then we went on with our work and just attributed it again to this infamous ghost.
Security Director of Savage Mills, Stephen Bryant, has received many calls regarding strange occurrences while working the night shift.
We've had people talk about seeing things move. About a year ago, we was having the floor redone over in the eatery, and the guys who worked there said they seen someone walking around at the other end of the mill. This was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and there was no one around. I've had phone calls from tenants and stuff claiming that they've heard people running around and doors slamming, and they would be the only people who have been around for 3 or 4 hours. So I'd go investigate. Of course, everything is still locked up, and I didn't hear nothing, I didn't see anything. So those are just some of the stories, which we get those calls quite often.
The ghost of Savage Mill keeps a low profile with customers, but to the artists and shop owners, she is no secret, only a reminder of the past and the memory of a woman who refuses to be forgotten. In Elkridge, Maryland, stands a haunted residence in an area called Lawyers Hill. The lawn, as the estate is known, was formerly owned by a prominent Baltimore judge, George Dobbin.
Judge Dobbin was quite an interesting individual. He was on the board of directors of the Johns Hopkins University, the Johns Hopkins Hospital, the University of Maryland Law School. He was a prominent citizen, and I'll explain a little bit about the Civil War. He was a Southern sympathizer, but also very well known in Baltimore politics. And during the Civil War, the beginning of the Civil War, a Boston or a Massachusetts regiment was on their way to Washington, D.C. And in order to get a train south to D.C., they needed to get off at one train station in Baltimore and march several blocks to another train station. And during that march, they were attacked by the citizens of Baltimore, small riot. And several citizens were killed, soldiers were injured. I don't know if any of them were killed, but it was a real problem. So the mayor got a contingent of prominent local citizens to go down and meet with President Lincoln and request that any future troop movements to the south from the north would go around Baltimore if at all possible. And Judge Dobbin was one of 4 or 5 citizens of Baltimore that met with President Lincoln to ask that this be done.
Judge Dobbin died in the house and is believed to be one of the 20 ghosts that inhabit the estate. Janice and Richard Manier have been owners of the lawn for the past 8 years and have experienced the ghost's presence on several occasions.
The first night we moved in, I'd put up some shelves in the kitchen and old plaster walls. There were no studs to really go into. They were tough to find. And I'd put the shelf up, and it seemed fairly sturdy, and I put some heavy pottery bowls on it and went to bed, and just ready to fall asleep, and I heard this noise. It sounded like that, and couldn't figure out where it was coming from. And knowing that previous tenants had some strange experiences, needless to say, my heart was in my throat, and I just pulled the covers up over my head, and then it got crazy. I said, I've got to find out where that's coming from. And I thought the shelf, then the thought came to me, the shelf is coming down, my first night in a new house. I could imagine all the pottery falling on the floor, making a racket, the landlord and landlady not being very pleased with that. So I wanted to go out to the kitchen to make sure that wasn't taking place. And when I got out there, the sound had moved out into the hall behind a closed door, and it was coming again, like that. And at that point, when I found out the shelf wasn't coming down, I went back to bed.
The kids were here, and they play in this room, and they were playing dress-ups or whatever, and they left the room, and I came back later, and the door was locked, and I could see the key in the middle of the room here, and it was the strangest thing. The windows were all locked. They had come and gone out of the door, and I literally had to more or less bang on the door very hard with total body weight, and it did move the door back so it would slide through, and that's how we got into the room. But the key was in here.
A portion of the house is rented to tenants who have also experienced strange incidents.
One tenant of May and Joe, who lived upstairs, their son, who was 5 or 6 at the time, was in his bedroom, and they had called him to come eat. And he kept saying, wait a minute. Well, we all know as parents that's typical. Wait a minute, Mom. Wait a minute. And after a few wait a minutes, they decided they better go in and see what was going on. And when they went in, he said, I told you I'd be coming in a minute. I'm talking to these people. And they were like, what people? We don't see any people. And he started to tell them the people's names and whatnot. Well, when they checked into the history of the house, these people were all listed as having lived here, but many, many years ago. So that was another story. Just about everybody that's lived here has some kind of story to tell of some strange occurrence that happened to them.
The Meneers were aware of their home's ghost stories before even purchasing the property. But when asked why they bought the house anyway, they said, it adds character to the home.
Well, there you have it. Unexplained phenomenon. Are these confused spirits or souls who were somehow left behind? Are there such things as apparitions, the visual proof of a ghost, or is it simply our imaginations running wild? Can these spirits take the form of poltergeists and actually move objects, lock doors, open windows, and make strange noises? Do you believe in ghosts? That's it for this edition of On Location, but be careful this Halloween. Someone or something may try to make a believer out of you.